These students are recreating China's most popular dating show on their college campus.
So when I heard that there's going to be a Chinese TV-style dating show, I was thinking like 50 people in a classroom.
But this is on a whole different level. And it's all happening in Illinois. The University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign enrolls more than 5,000 Chinese students. So many, it's been called the University of China at Illinois. And it's part of a global trend. In the US alone, there are now 6 times more Chinese students than there were just 2 decades ago. They account for 1/3 of all international students and contributed nearly $14 billion to the US economy in 2017. But what are the implications of so many students and so much money coming from just one country? We're traveling around the world to find out how China is reshaping basically everything. This week, universities. I'm Isabel Niu reporting for Quartz. You're watching Because China.
绿街这条街上好多中国餐馆。
对。
Xiang Huafeng is a fourth-year accounting student from China.
他们有上过一些就是研究生和本科生混合的课，一共13个人的 seminar， 只有1个人不会讲中文，就是教授。
Chinese students like Xianghua are here because of 2 converging trends. The first is pretty straightforward. More Chinese students study abroad than ever before, thanks to the country's fast-expanding middle class. The second reason is that universities in rich English-speaking countries have been admitting more and more international students because they need money. Hello? Professor Hans de Witt studies international higher education. He says this is a relatively recent shift. So when did universities begin to see international students as a revenue source?
Well, that depends a little bit by country. The countries which were on the forefront were Australia and the United Kingdom.
British and Australian universities introduced full international fees in the 1980s. Universities began aggressively marketing and recruiting. By 2010, the number of international students jumped by 600% in the UK and 2,000% in Australia. In the US, it happened a little later, partly because higher education has always been pretty expensive.
Tuition is very high for both local students and international students, so there was not an active need until recently to recruit international students for income reasons.
Then 2008 happened.
Substantial cuts to higher education.
We've been cut $400 million.
And how will these public institutions survive the current budget crisis?
Funding for state universities was already in decline before 2008, but the recession made things much worse. So state universities were forced to find revenue elsewhere, and they found it in China. This chart sums it up. Here's the growth trend of Chinese students in the US before the recession, and this is post-recession. If we think of higher education as an export, then this is one area where the US has a huge trade surplus with China. All the Chinese students I talked to say they chose a state school because they can get more bang for their buck. That's true even though a Chinese undergrad at a state university like UIUC pays about $20,000 more in tuition every year than an in-state student.
外面修路的钱呐，一大半都恐怕是从跟我学费是跑不了的。
Universities use revenue from international students to subsidize other operations, including creating scholarships for Americans. And the numbers show that it's not just good for the school, it's good for the American economy.
They shop in the local stores. They travel back and forth to China. They spend money in terms of their social life or traveling within the United States. So every part of the United States benefits from that.
But there are also serious risks with relying on Chinese students' tuition.
If you are becoming so dependent on foreign students, and in particular on one group, Chinese students, then your sustainability as an institution becomes very fragile.
The business school gets about 20% of its revenue from more than 800 Chinese students enrolled here.
And that's a big enough number that that's something you want to be able to protect yourself against.
This is the dean of the business school at UIUC, Jeff Brown. In 2017, his school did something unprecedented. The business school and engineering school together took out a $60 million insurance policy in case of a sudden drop in Chinese student enrollment.
As far as we know, we're the first to do this anywhere in the world. And we've gotten a lot of phone calls from other universities about how to do it. I know a lot of places are interested in doing it.
And that deal was before President Trump's trade war with China.
I think the risk that we identified back 4 years ago is still very much there. One could argue, actually, that the risk is perhaps elevated.
And making sure international students succeed takes resources. UIUC has invested a lot in programs that help international students adjust to American campus life. The university even broadcasted its football games in Mandarin in 2015.
I think the more that our domestic students and the students from China get to interact with each other, and frankly, I think that's not just good for the University of Illinois, I think that's good for the world.
But differences in language and culture make those kinds of exchanges more difficult for everyone.
I think that there's definitely a stigma there that they are kind of viewed as a different group of people that have different interests. I think if there was more interaction between the groups and there was less divide, it would only help the campus grow. So
中国人的话，其实很多人的舒适圈都是跳不出来，70%到80%说中文吧。
If students go through the entire 4 years of college without interacting with the wider community or improving their English, that's a missed opportunity for both domestic students and the international students themselves. That doesn't mean students aren't happy. Those I talked to said they're creating their own version of the American college experience.
Socially, I've had a blast. I've met lots of great people, lots of great friends. I personally don't think my college experience would have changed really at all with international students or without. Again, I believe that college is what you make of it.
那你想家吗？其实很少，很少。因为我觉得，因为这边中国人实在太多了，所以你就有时候会感觉啊，自己，而中国餐厅也多，有时候会感觉自己好像就是在身边的人就很熟悉，就不会有很强的想家的一种感受吧。
This story is a free episode from our series Because China. Click to sign up for a free trial for a Quartz membership. You'll get access to the entire series and all of our reporting on the forces reshaping the global economy.